Julian, thank you very much for that presentation. That was very informative. Anyone, if you have questions out there, we do have a contest going on right now. You can go on our Telegram channel. That's Telegram. It's Xend Finance, XEND FINANCE. You can also go on our Twitter, leave some questions there in the comments. The top 10 questions will get a $300 prize. So save your questions, send them there. Julian's free to answer them afterwards. But before then, I want to now move on to Arjun Kalsy, who's the VP of Growth at Polygon. He's been there, and Polygon, of course, has been they have their hand in a little bit of everything as well, just like Binance. So without any further ado, I'll let Vijay, are you there? Or Arjun, I'm sorry, Arjun, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I will introduce Arjun right now. He's set to go live. And so Arjun, please, your camera, please.
Sure thing. I hope you guys can hear me and see me as well. So great to be here. And I'll not take too much time and I'll jump right into it. But very excited to talk about what's happening with DeFi and how Polygon is thinking about it. So let me try and share my screen. And what I wanted to do was, as a part of this presentation, just cover some interesting ways of let's say thinking about DeFi. Like, for example, when you have decentralized finance, like how do you think about decentralized finance? How do you what are these different Legos and how they work? So I'll just go live, and I hope you're able to see my screen. So I just wanted to start with like a quick brief about Hi, can you guys hear me? I don't know if I got dropped off.
You got dropped off for a second, but I think you're back on. Yes.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, all right. Yeah, the internet gods are not on my side today. All right, so I'll just give you a quick brief about Polygon. So again, we started in 2017. Our objective was to try and scale the Ethereum ecosystem. Of course, there were scalability concerns ever since the 2017 Crypto Kitties episode. I don't know if how many of you remember, but this is a time when Ethereum just stopped working because of a cat game, and of course serious questions are asked. So that's kind of where our story started. And again, what we built in a few words would be a very fast blockchain with a 2-second block time, something which is EVM compatible and uses the same sort of assets as Ethereum, so the same ERC style assets which developers are used to. And in users as well, the transaction costs are like super low. So we built a blockchain where for about $10 you can do over 1 million transactions. And of course, we also checkpoint all the transactions periodically onto Ethereum. So we Merkle root transactions every let's say 256 blocks, and put that transaction on Ethereum. So you get security on our network as well, which is a proof of stake network with over 100 validators, so very decentralized. But then you also get security on Ethereum because all your assets are discoverable on Ethereum. And when you have something which is fast and inexpensive, that's when you can start building for user experience, right? So the UX has to be really good for users because most of the users in the world are used to like using, let's say, a mobile phone or accessing the internet, and are used to a certain kind of, let's say, digital experience. And whatever blockchain technology or whatever DeFi or gaming or NFT you build, it has to provide the same, if not better, user experience. Otherwise, you're not going to get mass adoption. And of course, we've got a large community, over 700 apps down, onboarded, close to 1,000 now. We're doing over 6 million transactions on a daily basis, and we've got a large amount of DVL. And I would dare say we built a very compelling technology, and which has seen unprecedented adoption as well. So what I wanted to do is I'm just going to jump right into it. Also on the adoption side, so there's so much more when it comes to DeFi, right? So every major tier 1 DeFi protocol you've heard of, whether it is Aave, Balancer, SushiSwap, or Curve, are live on Polygon. We've got a huge ecosystem in DeFi and in NFT and gaming. And what that does is that allows this degree of composability allows this interesting mix of using GameFi and some of the things, which we've seen have become very popular with NFT and DeFi and all of these things combining into metaverse concepts and that also creating entirely new types of economies. So we've got a very large ecosystem. I encourage you guys to take a look. But of course, this conversation is about DeFi. So what I want to do is I wanted to talk about DeFi, but in a slightly different manner. And I wanted to talk about, how you need to think about DeFi. Like generally, like if you come from, let's say, a centralized finance world, like what is DeFi and how you think about it. And essentially what you really need to discuss in this conversation is DeFi composability, right? So what is DeFi composability, like decentralized finance composability? The composability is that when you're able to build a DeFi ecosystem where you have apps, which are like we discussed earlier, like Legos, where you have lending and borrowing, and then you can add maybe leverage on top of that, and then that allows you to build other kinds of maybe synthetic assets or derivatives or options. This is kind of what DeFi composability means. So by using these certain Legos, just like in centralized finance, where you have a bank which does basic lending and borrowing, and then you can build like an entire stock market on top of it and all these different financial instruments. The decentralized finance works in quite the same way. So you need these Legos. The biggest advantage here is like there is no middleman. So as a result, all the profits or rather all the optimization in terms of resources are basically are given to the user. So the user basically benefits from that entire margin, which is typically eaten up by middlemen in a centralized finance world. And essentially the functionality of one protocol can be utilized in another protocol. And this is kind of what makes decentralized finance very interesting, that how all of these different financial instruments are kind of linked together. So it's not really like, it's very different that way from a centralized finance kind of concept where you have a stock and the stock is fundamentally different, or from, let's say, a mutual fund or a different kind of financial instrument. Like here everything is kind of interlinked, and this makes it super interesting. And why is composability important? Because you can basically do things like you can have high utilization of capital. It makes capital sticky as well, since all this capital is being reused in different places. It gives lots of different opportunities for developers to build like different kinds of things, because already a code base exists and some Legos exist, and now you can build on top of them. So you don't have to reinvent finance per se. And of course, composability encourages more users and more liquidity, and thereby more dApps. And without taking too much time, like I wanted to give you guys like a DeFi ecosystem breakdown. So if you were to look at it from a layers perspective, like on layer 0 is basically where you have all the different bridges and fiat on ramps. So this is kind of layer 0 is how you get liquidity or funds into a system, right? So the first step you need to do is get the funds into the system. So as a protocol, you need to be able to solve bridging. You need to be able to solve fiat on ramps. Once you have that, that's where the money markets come into play, right? So this is where you have your basic lending and borrowing. So think of all of this like a bank, where you have basic lending and borrowing, like people can lend assets and people can borrow assets, right? And once you have that, you can then build other interesting things. So let's say you have many different assets, you can then build DEXs, right? Which allow you to swap these assets, right? You can have fixed yield instruments like fixed deposits, right? And you can also build interesting things like margin trading, right? Where basically you are now talking about leverage, right? And then you go one layer above, right? And you go from layer 1 to layer 2, and then you go to layer 3. This is kind of where you can take aggregators, which sort of aggregate all of these, let's say, fixed yield or DEX sort of yield aggregating instruments, and then sort of aggregate them. And these are typically your yield aggregators. This is kind of also where insurance comes into play, right? When you're building these kind of things. And then on top of that, further, you have auto compounding, you have derivatives, then you have synthetic assets, right? And right on the top of all of this entire money-making ecosystem, of course, you need to have analytics, right? And then you need to have user-facing tools like Zapper, etc., where you can do like other interesting kind of things, and you can make things easy for users to access DeFi, to monitor the yields and do those kind of things. So in general, DeFi Lego pieces can be organized across these 5 layers, right? And also it's interesting how capital risk and reward also increases as we move up the layers. So just like in a bank, you have fixed deposits where you may get less yield, and then you go to stock markets, and then you go to derivatives, and then you go to like options. It's the same in decentralized finance. So there are a lot of, let's say, similarities here. So if you are into, let's say, centralized finance, you've done some stock trading, you've done some investments, it'll be very easy for you to pick this up because a lot of the layers remain the same. I also want to talk about maybe going one level deeper, right? So like I said, layer one is your low risk DeFi protocols. Then you have medium risk. Layer three is more complex DeFi protocols. So layer three is kind of when you start getting into all of this auto compounding and derivatives, etc. And again, requiring quality human capital to generate superior risk and adjusted returns. This is very interesting because all of these kind of auto compounders and aggregators need, let's say, people to come up with these strategies where what are the different dexes and protocols you can use to increase the yield on your capital, right? And this is how so interesting because this is currently mostly a human job. Like there are people who are experts at designing strategies and they look at all of these different protocols and figure out which is the best strategy to use. So suppose you put some money in there, you put some crypto in there, how do you get the best return? And this is what really makes it so interesting for me, that you have all of this automation and you have all of these smart contracts, but yet there is this very, very important human capital injection in here, without which you cannot get the best yields, which is so super interesting. And of course, you need all of these analytic platforms, right? So this is kind of where you can do these on-chain analytics and try and figure out what's happening. And of course, do other things and figure out where the yields are. And again, from Polygon's perspective, right, when we talk about building DeFi and CeFi, when you try to build that bridge, like what are some of the things you need to do, right? So if I want to break it down into 4 different things, number one is you need to ease the entry into blockchain, right? So you need to make it easy. So if I were to just go back, this bottom layer, right, of bridges, of fiat on ramps, you need to make this super easy for users to enter decentralized finance, right? To try it. And this is kind of where what we've done is we've done integrations with a large number of popular wallets and large number of centralized exchanges as well, so that users and assets can easily access on-chain DeFi vehicles, right? So you can go from a centralized exchange to on-chain decentralized finance. And this is not just for users, but for liquidity as well. What we are also doing is building high performance infrastructure. So we have a very high performance chain, but we are already building for the future. We are actively researching ZK rollup technology, and sort of other concepts like light clients to sort of build a next generation sort of level of scalability. Also, of course, you need all the DeFi tooling. So you need easy audits, you need access to liquidity. You also need some sort of privacy built in there. So this is kind of, again, where we're using zero knowledge technology, which can be used not just for privacy, but also for scalability. And of course, very important for us at Polygon is also decentralization and community, right? So we've set up like a DeFi DAO, and we want to set up more DAOs so that the community has a greater say in ecosystem building on what should be done, what kind of DeFi plus CeFi, or what kind of things do we need to do within the ecosystem to engage more users and enable a kind of, let's say, decentralized decision making. And just to jump into the next slide, I also wanted to just take a couple of minutes to talk about zero knowledge rollups. So we've recently acquired a company for about 250 million. This is Hermez blockchain, which is an optimized payments platform. And what we're looking to do is bring a big degree of focus onto ZK EVM technology. So we want to be able to build zero knowledge EVM technology so that your current code base on Ethereum is reusable, and you can inject zero knowledge features in there, not just for rollups to increase scalability, but also for privacy. And furthermore, after, as a part of this acquisition, we've committed $1 billion from our treasury towards building this zero knowledge privacy privacy plus scalability future, so that you can like supercharge DeFi. So this kind of just brings me to the end of my presentation. And I hope I was able to give you guys like a different kind of view into how to think about DeFi. So that's about it from my side. Thank you.
Arjun, thank you very much for